Are you tired of watching shows that only give you general social media theory and expect you to figure out how to apply it to your own industry? Join us for this week's episode of Social Chatter, the industry's longest running social media marketing news talk show. Not only will you learn the latest breaking news, but you'll also gain practical advice on how to apply it. Now here's your host, Christian Karasiewicz.
Welcome, everyone, to Social Chatter, your weekly social media marketing news talk show. This is episode 257, and this week it's going to be Jim Fuhs and myself. You might know Jim. He is the founder of Fusion Marketing. He's also, though, my co-host. We have a podcast. It's called Launch Your Live, where we are, let's see, how can I put it? We're teaching people how to actually go live on a number of the platforms. Now, it's not just, okay, well, let's just go live on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn Live. What we actually cover are pretty much all of the nuts and bolts. So we talk about, whether you should actually be using live video versus pre-recorded video. We also discuss various tools. For example, should you be using maybe some live stream alternative tools, things that let you pre-record that video and schedule it as if it's live. We also talk about things such as the internet speeds and whatnot that you need for live streaming. So basically, we want to get you moving on live streaming because there's a lot of people that say, hey, you know what? I want to do live streaming, and then they never get around to it. So that's our podcast. What we're going to do though today, though, is Jim and I are going to be talking about the latest social media news, and there's always something changing every single week. I mean, literally, right before we started this show, we had already added a couple of additional topics to our list. But I can tell you right now, the main ones we're going to focus this week on are Instagram guides. We're going to talk about a new quote tweet feature. In addition to that, Facebook has a couple of major changes. I think these are pretty major. They're changing the terms of service. They're also going to be combining Messenger and Instagram Direct. So we're going to talk about that. We also have a tool from Google, which is pretty fascinating, actually. And they're actually taking on Pinterest with this tool. So we'll get to that later in the show. But what I want to do first is bring on Jim. Jim, fantastic having you join me as usual. How you doing?
Great. And yeah, we just released episode 24, live streaming video alternatives. And we even talked about that, I think, on a previous episode of Social Chatter. We're talking about live pigeon. There's also one stream and even restream. Uh,
Yeah.
and so we talked about that because there may be times that you want to do that. But I always like the live video because, right, you just never know what's going to happen, right, Christian?
And here's the thing. I mean, um, when you're using live video alternative tools, I mean, you have to think about it from the standpoint of your customer. So you don't want to trick them, but it can be a time saver as well. So you just have to be very mindful about doing that. Follow, do what's right for your customer. Don't just do it to take a shortcut. I think that's the key point here. So, Jim, do you want to go and kick things off, by the way? And how's my audio sounding? I just made a little small tweak to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, if for those of you watching it, maybe if you can get a little louder, but I can hear you okay, but I just wanna make sure the people out there in, live stream land can hear you. And,
Perfect.
so I'm going to, start out with one of the things that has come up is Instagram guides have been out, and so now we have this new thing with guides. If you wanna screen share it, I think I've got it there for you to share.
Absolutely. So what do we have going on? Instagram guides.
Yeah, so guides is continuing to potentially expand, so that perhaps there'll be a live streaming guide from Christian and Jim from Launch Your Live, and it's really they're highlighting some of their experts with these guides to help you, uh, I guess get smarter at things, which I think is it's a nice feature. Um,
Mhm.
Curious to see how that works. I know I'm getting more active on Instagram than I have been previously. I think it does definitely have some great advantages, and there's, another topic we're gonna talk about a little bit later in the show that kinda makes you think, "Yeah, I gotta pay attention to my Instagram." What do you think, Christian?
Well, so I think the guides are a very fascinating thing. So basically, what you're going to be able to do here is, first off, you have to actually be in the wellness area to get the guides feature. It's going to look like It's almost like a newspaper or magazine icon that you'll see on the account. And when somebody clicks on this or they tap on this, they're going to pull up the guides that those people have created. Now, right now, the utility is this is designed for well-being. So wellness, well-being, with all of us at home for the most part, um, Instagram wants to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, our mental health. And so that's why they're rolling out the guides feature. This has actually been something they've tried working on actually back in, I think it was May, but now it's actually turning into a useful feature. Now with guides, the other thing it's also going to be doing, I think, from a business perspective, right now, yes, it's limited, but I think there's a lot of utility because you can create tutorials, step-by-step guides, and you can actually then have people follow you to get your Instagram guides eventually. So I think it's a good useful feature. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point with the health and wellness. I mean, I think a lot of these platforms are all doing their part to help people. I would say even in a sense with mental health, because we're spending a lot of time on these platforms, and some of the stuff you see can definitely kind of drag you down if you let yourself get sucked into it. So it's okay to take a break from social every once in a while. Get outside, get some fresh air, go for a walk. And make sure you're eating well. Yeah, I think the health and wellness part, I think, is a great place to start.
Definitely. And again, I mean, this is not something that's rolled out to everyone right now. So you probably will not see it on your account, but you check around with people who are, interested in well-being and wellness and mental health and whatnot. They actually might have it on their accounts if they're pretty active users. So, Jim, where do you want to go next?
All right. Well, we will go next to one of my favorite platforms. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about something going on with our friends at Twitter. Let me make sure I find the right one here. Let's see.
By the way, while you're actually bringing this up, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to actually bring Neal in because Neal just joined us.
Awesome.
Neal, it's fantastic having you join us for episode, was it 257 of Social Chatter. Thanks a lot, Neal.
Hey, gentlemen, thanks for the invite.
And look, I've got one of my favorite books right here.
Thank you, sir.
I unfortunately don't have a copy of it yet, actually, so I got to work on that.
I actually was handed it to me by Mr. Schaffer himself at one of the last big conferences in America before all this happened, and it was great to get to hang out with Neal there. So Neal, great to see you. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, no, it was great to meet you there. And Christian, I mean, we've had from the Social Tool Summit days, we've been going back and forth. I've never had a chance to meet you, and now I have my first chance today to virtually see you. So this is awesome.
Yes, definitely. Thanks a lot for joining us, by the way. So what we've been talking about so far, we've covered Instagram guides, just came out this week, or an update to it. We're going to now move into these Twitter quote tweets. And I know you're pretty big on Twitter, I think, Neal, right? And Jem, you are always praising how useful Twitter can be for a business, for an individual user. But tell people, so Jem, what's this Twitter quote tweet feature?
Yeah, so I think, and I think if you can share it now, I think I've got it where you can share the screen. So it used to be you would just retweet, or what we call retweet with comment. Well, now they're calling it a quote tweet, which is probably in a sense more appropriate because you're adding a comment to someone's original tweet. So I know a lot of times I love retweeting some of the stuff that Neal puts out, especially since we're talking about influencer marketing today. He puts out some great stuff there, and he does the same thing. Twitter, I feel like over the last 6 months especially, has been adding little things that make a difference. Right now, you can schedule tweets from within the desktop and the app, things that people were asking for. Still like an edit button, Twitter, if you're out there listening. But I think this is a good thing, right? It lets people know, okay, there's a difference, right? And for engagement purposes, really, I think a quote tweet is always better because didn't they just come out with a feature as well that if you're just retweeting all the time, they're going to like, hey, you need to maybe pause a second. Are you sure you want to retweet this? I think we talked about that a couple weeks ago. I mean, what are your thoughts, Neal?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is trying to remain relevant, right? So whenever I see any change that any social network makes, I always think of their competition. So obviously, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, we see that really clearly. Twitter, even though they're not sexy and they don't have anything buzzworthy like the other platforms have, they still have a big audience, right? It's still the place where the news breaks. It's still the place where journalists go, where celebrities go. It's still the place where conversations go or happen. So I believe that these little changes, and you're right, they've made a lot of little changes over the last several months. I think it's just how do we serve our community and make them stay on our platform longer? And there's nothing revolutionary with any of these changes, but they all, help with the user experience and help, the community want to stay there longer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Christian. Jump on in.
So I was going to say, I mean, the fact that they're dividing up retweets and quote tweets, I think this could be very useful for a business. To your point, I think they should focus on the quote tweet versus the retweet, because it's very easy to automate the retweet. For the most part, you really don't want to do that. But with the quote tweet, you can actually see, maybe I'm getting, to Neal's point, maybe I'm getting journalists to share this, for example, or, maybe there's some really big companies that actually like my content and want to share it. So I think that, if you are looking at your numbers, it's always good to see retweets because, hey, that shows people are doing something, and likes, for example, that's like, a lower form of engagement. But I think that the quote tweet is really going to be key. It also, I think, can help with building your audience a little bit better too, because people will be able to then see your content within someone else's, when they quote you in a tweet. And so I think that'll be very useful. Anything else you guys want to add on this feature? Anything a business might want to check out or consider trying with Twitter quote tweets?
Yeah, for me, I always, whenever there's a new feature out, I go, okay, when are the tools going to support that feature, right? Because businesses, especially with Twitter, maybe with Facebook and LinkedIn, there's still a lot of manual posting, but I think Twitter is the platform that most companies probably use tools on. And therefore, until it's supported by the tools, I don't know how many companies are actually going to use it. I feel that about every new feature, right?
That's a great point, Neal. Yeah, because right, we're seeing a lot of changes in Facebook. We're going to be talking about something coming up here soon. I think a lot of people right now are dreading. Right, it's September. You're getting the new Facebook, whether you like it or not. And so I've definitely seen some changes there. People like, oh my gosh, where's all my stuff? And it's there. You just can't find it the same.
Definitely. So, okay, so let's move on then, Jim. So where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so let's talk about Facebook. We'll talk about them updating their terms of service. So if you want, I'll share that, Christian, here. Let me pull that up. Here we go. All right.
Okay, so topic 3 for the week: Facebook is changing their terms of service. Now, this is supposed to take effect, October 2020. So you have about a month on this, right? I think the striking thing, though, with the Facebook terms of service here is that they've painted a very broad brushstroke. And what they're able to do now with their terms of service, when this goes into effect, is, you're not just getting the new Facebook coming up, but you're also going to potentially have some of your content, I think, taken down. What do you guys think about that? I mean, obviously, Facebook, they're running into a lot of obstacles, I think I would say right now, with people wanting, well, why are certain users getting banned? Why are certain ones not? Why is this content up and so forth? But Jen, what do you think?
Well, I saw this, Mari Smith posted it in her group yesterday. And my comment on this is people start complaining, but it's like, hey, you're on rented land. If you don't like Facebook's terms of service, go somewhere else. I mean, they're covering themselves, right? They're trying to make sure that as a business, they don't get sued. I mean, they've gone through so much since the 2016 election. I mean, and now with the upcoming election here in a couple months, things are definitely getting tense, I guess would be an understatement on social. I think that's why probably for me, it's the platform I spend the least time on. Probably partially because of that, because I just don't, need negativity in my life. I'd rather read Neal's book and see good things. But I mean, what do you think, Neal?
Yeah. Oh, amen, Jim. As far as we're playing in their playground, it's funny. People talk about the Facebook user interface, but it must have been, Christian, you probably remember, like 5 or 6 years ago, LinkedIn made a significant change to their user interface, right? I mean, Facebook's been nice enough to let us, play around with it and preview it. They can do whatever the heck they want, right? So Yeah, whenever we sign into a social network, we agree to the terms of service without really looking at the details. So this is going to be buried in the terms. If someone new was to join, they would be accepting it anyway. So yeah, I don't see how it can make people mad or change the way businesses use the platform. To me, it's not newsworthy. I'd rather focus on more newsworthy items, but that's my own take.
Yeah. No, definitely. And, I think the other part to this is, this particular, it's section 3.2. It says we can also remove or restrict access to your content, services, or information if we determine that doing so is reasonably necessary to avoid or mitigate adverse legal or regulatory impacts of Facebook. Here's the thing. When to both of your points, like when you sign up for Facebook, you are agreeing to the terms of service. Most of the time people don't read that, but you also have to look at like what your business does. So for example, if I'm, offering like coaching, I'm an author, for example, I'm a speaker, any of that kind of stuff, chances are it's not going to ruffle any feathers. We're only talking about a lot of the more severe things. If you're doing a lot of nefarious activity, that is something that Facebook's going to probably want to look at and say, well, hey, we don't want to have, this type of content on our platform. And again, if the person doesn't like it, they're going to get shut down. What's going to happen? They're going to move to the next platform, and then they're going to keep moving, moving, and moving. So I mean, not that big of a deal, I don't think. I mean, what do you get? Anything else you guys want to add about these Facebook updated terms of service?
It's just, I think to your point, right? It's something people have to be aware of. It's like even when I, am consulting with people or giving classes, they'll be like, "Oh, why can't I just run my business on my personal page?" It's like, read the terms of service, right? You can share things there, but you're putting yourself at risk. And then you'll hear these realtors like, "Oh, I got put in Facebook jail. Why? Because you didn't want to set up a business page." It's a monetary platform for Facebook. They're looking to make money. I almost laugh sometimes. People act like the social platforms owe them free marketing. Well, why should I have to spend money on it? I mean, that's kind of my take.
Yeah, and we've been through this, man. They've been saying that for the last several years. But I mean, Christian, I think to your point, bang on. And who is going to be negative? Who might potentially be negatively affected by this, right? It's not going to be the normal business. It's going to be someone that's doing something. But when we think about regulatory or legal, so you're promoting a drug that will cure COVID-19, and then someone takes it and dies, but that person saw it on Facebook, there is a chance that Facebook might be responsible, right? And so I think it's stuff like that. So I think, for 99.9% of us, I don't think we have anything to worry about. And, we all have CYAs, that, as we call them in our business, and Facebook needs them as well. I mean, can you imagine the stuff that gets posted on that network on a daily basis?
Well, apparently Facebook decided the last election because, it was on Facebook, it must be true. And that's why people voted the way they did.
Don't get me started.
And to add,
is this political chefs or social chefs?
I know, right?
That's right. That's all we're saying about politics today.
By the way, speaking of politics, actually, this is a little aside. So Facebook is also adding to your ad library the ability to track political spending for ads as well. Not my cup of tea there. But to Neal's point, it's the fact that this is going to affect, yes, certain types of businesses. Not most of the ones that people are running are not going to be affected. I would say one type of business to maybe consider an MLM or any sort of multi-level marketing company. I think, if you're selling those kinds of products, I know Facebook's really been trying to crack down on that as well, because again, I mean, it's not really regulated by the FDA. So that might be content that they also might want to remove, because again, somebody takes a product and, they haven't, something happens to them, something catastrophic, could potentially affect that kind of business. I don't know. Do you guys think, do you see like any CBD or any sort of like alcohol sales? Like, do you think those would be something that, might immediately get Facebook to, to shut down a page?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I know that Google has been strict, I think, especially with some of the, especially with like guns, and I think also with some of the CBD companies. I think that's as it's becoming more, I guess if you want to say, accepted, especially like in the CBD medical marijuana field, as it becomes legal in states. I think that's one that's been moving a little bit more mainstream acceptance. But I think to the point that Neal brought up earlier, if somebody dies because they took some oil, does Facebook want to be held responsible for that? So I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah, and if we look at, I mean, understanding how corporate America works, someone in legal said, "Man, we should just add this to the user agreement." It gets, and everybody agrees because it's a great idea, and there you have it. So it may be just not something really big. They didn't do it for a certain reason, but hey, why don't we have this in our user agreement? We should put it in there just in case. And maybe that's the best way to look at it.
Right.
Yeah. I also think that I feel like this is also something that if you look at what's been going on in the world mostly lately, a lot of people are, they're talking about like, well, hey, Facebook's removing this certain type of political group or sort of, group that is really impacting, they're creating more protests and things like that. I think that at least these terms of service make me feel like, okay, that might be why Facebook's trying to do this. And you also have obviously like in Australia, I think it is, they have, they're trying to crack down on what people are able to share on the platform, like to the point where I think it can go back to the user. If the user shares it, it could actually then impact Facebook. So again, I think a broad brushstroke going on here, but definitely something, I mean, read the terms of service. If you don't like it, don't use the platform. So Jim, what's next?
Well, let's stay on the topic of Facebook and let's talk about Facebook Messenger merging with Instagram Direct. And if you want to pull the article up, I can share here a little bit.
What do we got going on? So
the actual ability now, mind you, this is in the Facebook roadmap, right, to world domination. They're going to merge Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, and WhatsApp Messenger at some point. So this makes sense. This is that logical step of allowing you to merge your Facebook Messenger with Instagram Direct. Now, the pro is that you get access to both your inboxes from the same place. But what it does is when you do this, you're going to be able to, these are the benefits: colorful looks for your chats, react with any emoji, swipe to reply to messages, and chat with friends who use Facebook from Instagram. That I think could be a very beneficial feature, but as you know, terms of service, before you choose to update, be aware it will change the look and feel of your Instagram and direct message inbox. Now, what are my thoughts on this in the big scheme of things? Of course, I want to run ads while we're doing this. Is that what we're going to run into? You're not going to have a choice at some point, right? This is kind of like the new Facebook. You can pay me now, you can pay me later. I think this is eventually going to be the look and feel of what's going to happen to your inbox. The question becomes, when do you want to make that switch? Do you want to be that early adopter? Maybe if you've got a couple of different Instagram accounts, maybe try it on one account just to get the look and feel for it before maybe you switch to something else. I mean, what are your thoughts, Neal?
Yeah, Jim, you're absolutely right that at some point it doesn't make sense to have three different platforms. And we know obviously when Facebook created advertising for Instagram for the first time, they did it through the Facebook platform. So clearly Facebook is the king and they want everything to go through it. And it's really interesting. Just yesterday, I was revising a blog post I created of Facebook marketing stats. And there was one stat, like, we always talk about Facebook having 1 billion or 2 billion, and Instagram has 1 billion. But, in any given day, there's billions of people that will use one of these Facebook apps, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, or WhatsApp. And the funny thing is, the longer, as we transpire, Instagram 5 years ago was nothing. Today, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people on Instagram are also using Facebook. A lot of people on WhatsApp are also using Facebook, also using Instagram. So to combine these together, I think ad revenue is definitely one of it, because obviously we can target Facebook Messenger. We can't target Instagram direct message, and now we'll be able to. I think that's really powerful. But I do also, and here's the thing, whenever there's a new functionality announced, while you were talking, I was going to my own Facebook inbox, my own, Instagram. It's not there yet, right? So until I see how it changes the user experience, it's really hard for me to judge one way or the other from a user perspective. I do believe, as much as we say about or talk about Facebook, they do really value the user experience. And if users start tuning out of Facebook Messenger and Instagram direct messages, it's going to be a big problem for Facebook. And I think they realize that. So I got to believe that there's going to be a benefit for us as users. I've just yet to see it.
Right. Yeah, and I think what they're trying to say in their aspect is like, hey, if you do this, because I think there's actually more functionality in Facebook Messenger versus Instagram Direct Messenger. So we're going to bring over some of that functionality over to what you were doing on Instagram. So maybe it's a better, to your point, user experience. And so, I don't really use Instagram Messenger that much, other than maybe sharing stories. Um, but maybe it would make me start to use it more. Maybe there'll start to be more group chats and things of that nature. So, wonder if they would bring over messenger rooms.
Well, the interesting thing about the Instagram direct message, they really early on made it so that you can, group chats. And I mean, they add a lot of functionality there, because when I look at my own daughter who's in high school, who uses Instagram Direct is almost like an email inbox or a text box, right, on your phone. So it is sort of a major player, even though the functionality is nowhere near Messenger. So maybe it's that community that they have this audience, and if they can introduce them to more features, they'll stay on it longer, and then we can serve them ads. But like I said, until we see what that functionality looks like, hard to say. But yeah, it definitely, and we can say older generations, some of them use Facebook Messenger the way that younger generations use Instagram direct message. That becomes their lifeline. So yeah, and WhatsApp, we all know, has been, extremely popular in some parts of the world. So yeah, time will tell.
I will say this. I mean, I think that merging Messenger and Instagram Direct makes a lot of sense. Vincent Orlick and I have debated this for years and years that, like, hey, Facebook needs to at some point combine all these products. Now, I think to your point, Neal, this will give us the ability to serve up more ads, I think, on the platforms. And, the fact that, I mean, I'm glad Facebook owns all three of these different properties, but there's still a lot of people that don't even know that Facebook owns WhatsApp or Facebook owns Instagram and whatnot. I mean, I realize they put the icons at the bottom when you go to start the app, but most people don't pay attention to that stuff. They just want to get to the information. So I'm glad they're starting to do this. But again, I mean, if you're the user, it's getting back to the terms of service. I mean, you're going to have to deal with all of, just the nuances of how it works and how different it can be. For example, if you're used to WhatsApp is not any. I don't really think it's anywhere near as similar to Messenger or Instagram Direct, but a lot of the platform has started to converge. So you kind of just have to. I mean, I like using WhatsApp actually for a lot of things, but again, I also go in there without thinking, oh, I'm going to have, I'm not necessarily using a video call with somebody. I'm going to have just a quick chat with them. So I'm glad Facebook's combining these things, but again, I mean, it's good. It's a long process. I mean, I'd love to see what it's like behind the scenes of how do you actually merge these different products, because they seem so similar, but also so different, with potentially with the type of user you have as well on each platform. So Jen, I know we had a couple other topics we want to talk about this week, but what I want to do is I want to make sure we spend enough time chatting with Neal. So what we're going to do is we're going to move all the other topics we had. And, one of these topics, for example, was Google Keen. So it's a tool that rivals Pinterest, for example. We're going to talk about that one in the blog post recap that's going to go out. You can get that at socialchefs.com/daily. But you want to tell people, or maybe Neal, actually, maybe you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, actually. I know you've written a book, The Age of Influence.
Yes. So just like the fine gentleman I'm here with, I'm also a digital marketing, social media marketing consultant, speaker, written a few books. So when I met Jim, it was social media marketing world. And I just wrote a book called The Age of Influence. So I've been doing this for, over a decade now, literally. My first two books were about LinkedIn, because my background before all this is B2B sales and biz dev. So LinkedIn, social selling, something dear to my heart. But over time, marketing has been where the money is in social media consulting. So obviously, I've been doing ever since the days social media marketing strategy consulting, which has led to doing coaching, which has led to doing fractional CMO work and just helping a lot of businesses in a lot of different ways. So I wrote my first two books on LinkedIn. My third book was called Maximize Your Social. It's about social media strategy. And really, I talk about Facebook serving their community. It's a term that I use a lot these days, because I think with coronavirus, we all, businesses need to be serving their communities. So I serve my community by providing information and knowledge and experience. And I noticed a few years ago that there were a lot of questions I started getting asked about influencer marketing and about influencers in general. So that led me on a discovery of doing my research and looking at case studies and interviewing people, and then realizing that the way that influencer marketing is being talked about is really not representative of the potential it has for businesses. And therefore I wrote the book, hoping to, in a weird way, re-educate people, really unlock the potential that collaborating with people that have digital influence, you can call them influencers if you want, but they're not just necessarily Kim Kardashian types, but through collaborations with people, that it's a very, very powerful marketing medium, and it actually brings the social back to social media. So I'm really excited. The book came out just 2 days before California went on lockdown on March 17th. So not the best timing, but if you know the way the publishing world works, it was, planned for like a year. But like anything else in life, coronavirus is, and probably you too as well, it's giving you the chance to really double down on relationships, like things we're doing today, as well as on creating more content, because there's less travel time and less travel to clients, less travel speaking, what have you. So yeah, so far I've gotten great reception. I've definitely gotten business out of it. So I've gotten my ROI from writing the book, and yeah, excited to talk about it today with you guys.
Fantastic. So Jim, you want to kick things off? I know we have a couple questions prepared for Neal.
Yeah, I mean, Neal, and I think, you definitely talk about this in the book, because I think we're going to ask you this question, why would someone want to become an influencer, but you may be one and not even realize it?
Yeah. When I started looking at influencers and I, Christian, I know, like with social selling with IBM, you went through a lot of this, but I really connect the dots back to things like employee advocacy, where in many organizations, and this is why it's not just Instagram, it's LinkedIn, it's every social network, in B2B organizations, often the salespeople are the people that are out there. They're the people that are getting the attention in social. They have a bigger footprint than most brands have on their company pages. Well, I mean, if you're an IBM, it's another story, but for most small businesses. So when you look at it that way, right, you begin to define influencers as people that, one, are content creators, right? They're using social media, right? So they're publishing content on social media, and they're building a community normally around the topic that they're posting about. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it that way, right? Yes, there's people that have developed community and influence around photography and stories on Instagram. And there are people that have done the same thing around videos and YouTube. But what about we used to call them mommy bloggers back in the day. We used to have something called blogger outreach. Well, that's influencer marketing as well, right? These are people that use blogs as their platform. What about Pat Flynn? Who on earth who knows Pat Flynn would say he is not an influencer? How did he build his influence? Podcast, right? And now we have new people building influence through live stream. So, the content medium isn't important. The social network isn't important. What's important is that these people build the networks. Now, how big do you need to be an influencer is probably a follow-up question. And the influencer marketing industry, which is very Instagram centric, now has a new definition for something called a nano influencer, which has become quite popular over the last year or two. And they define a nano influencer as someone having, as little as 1,000 followers. So when I work with clients, when I speak, I say, hey, take a step back, look around you. Who already has 1,000 followers on any given network? Who has 1,000 LinkedIn connections, 1,000 Twitter followers? And then you say, well, Neal, everybody has that. And I say, no, not everybody has it. And in the book, I talk about this rule that was actually, like 15 years old. It's called the 99-1 rule. In fact, I first heard about this. Mike Obrito, going to give him a shout out. He spoke at the Social Tools Summit in San Francisco back in 2015, I believe. And he talked about this concept, which I think is really relevant for today. So the 99-1 rule, which was created back in like 2005, says on the internet, and we can look at social media the same way, 90% of users are lurkers, 9% are engagers, 1% are content creators. So let's look at LinkedIn, maybe 700 million members, right? How many people are actually posting content on a daily basis there? Okay, if it might just be 7 million, it might be 15 million, but it's not, not everybody's doing this. Not everybody is consistently publishing on Instagram. Heck, I can't publish consistently on Instagram, right? Yeah. Very few people can. So how many, everybody has a blog. No, not everybody. Everyone's doing lives. No, it's because we in social media are often we're in our own bubble where everybody around us is doing it, but go to the local Walmart and ask people if they know what a live stream video is, right? So that's the thing, is that when you become a content creator and you build up that, inherently you are influencing other people. You are on your way to becoming an influencer. And therefore, if I'm a business, and one of the chapters in my book is why businesses should try to yield more influence. But if you're getting people contacting you because they want to get a backlink from your site, they want to appear on your live stream, or they want to be interviewed on your podcast, these are all signs that you have influence that other people are tapping into. So you can imagine, the more influence you have, maybe the more influential guests you can have on your, maybe the more influential, links that you can obtain on your website, or maybe you can actually charge people if they want to. I started reaching out to some podcasters recently, and there were two that were charging like $500 to be on their podcast. And I'm thinking, talking about CBD, what are you guys smoking over there? But with influence comes the opportunity to tap into a lot of different things. And, in general, more people want to work with you. When you reach out to other influencers, it becomes a lot easier because you yourself are seen as having influence, and influencers love to work with other influencers. So it taps into to human nature that has been sort of amplified as social media amplifies things. Social media also amplifies influence. So it's a very, very powerful medium that I think every business, if you want to do digital marketing, you need to have content. You need to be the media. You need to be a content creator. So if you're doing it, you want to do it the right way to be able to yield influence so that people come to you. The media comes to you. Influencers come to you. And really at the end of the day, when influencers say something, people listen and they take action on it. And that's the most, I think any business wants more people listening to them and more people taking action. So that's where I think, tapping into the concepts of digital influence can be powerful for any business.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're really building that know, like, and trust, which that's when you become, I would guess, Neal, to your point, I think that's where you become the influencer. If I trust you, like with Neal Schaffer says something about influencer marketing, I'm going to listen because I've gotten to know, like, and trust Neal, not only through what he puts out there in content, but also because I've had a chance. Right? We actually have communicated. We've met in person, and that all started through social, right? So, when you're not putting out anything, nobody knows you exist. I think that's a great point, Neal.
And it's about like, know, and trust. That's exactly. It's I always say new tools, old rules, right? People and how in a virtual world like social media, how are people liking, know, and trusting you? In many ways, it's relatability. In many ways, it's showing up. First of all, it's showing up, period. But second, just showing that you're a real person, right? And showing your failures, as well as your successes, showing who you really are. So when I work with, getting back to sort of like LinkedIn and social selling and employee advocacy, how relatable is your LinkedIn profile? Is it written in third person? Do you even list any volunteer activities that you're probably doing? How can people relate to you? Because if you can make yourself relatable, and as a business, if you can make yourself relatable, that's going to help you build the like, know, and trust when people can't physically, especially in today's, era of pandemics, they can't physically meet you, but they can get to know more about you through your content. And I think that's the critical thing is that we are trying to build like, know, and trust. And that's universal. With social media, without social media, no one is going to, give you a $10 check without knowing who the hell you are, and without knowing, without liking you, and then trusting that that's going to be a good investment. So I don't think that's changed at all.
So next question for you. So how do you become an influencer? And the reason I ask this is because, to your point just a minute ago, a lot of people, they look at accounts and they're comparing themselves constantly to other people. So for example, if they have 1,000 followers, for example, and other people have 100,000 or 200,000 or some ungodly number, a lot of people, that really doesn't help them get off the starting block very well. So how do you actually go about becoming an influencer? I mean, any tips on that one?
Yeah. So I think the big problem that people have is they see social media as the objective instead of their business as the objective. And what I mean by this is, if you really want to become an influencer and you want to try to make even six figures doing it, it's going to take a long time, and you're probably not going to be successful, right? You're going to start out with companies pinging you, oh, we'll pay you a $25 Amazon gift card if you post this on Instagram. oh, can you help us insert a link in this post? We'll pay you $10. That does not pay the bills. So the smart way of thinking about influence is you already have a business, you already have a product or a service. How can we leverage social media to get to know more people, to get more people to like, know, and trust us? If you're just trying to become an influencer to become an influencer, hey, if you have a lot of money, if you're like a trust fund baby, go for it, right? You got all the time in the world. You can create all the content. You can try to claw your way up. But at the end of the day, there's so much fake following and fake engagement that even if your competitors have more followers, it doesn't, to me, if I'm beating them in business, I don't really care, right? And you're never going to be able to have more followers than everybody else in every platform. So you're going to have to live with the fact that, some companies, some of your competitors focus more on some platforms than others, and you focus on different ones, meaning that, chances are, even if you do your best, organically, you're not going to get there. But it really shouldn't be important. In fact, I wouldn't look at followers. I'd look at engagement. So many people on Instagram have 5, 6, 7, 8,000 followers, but they're getting 10 likes per post. And I see people with 1,000 followers getting 100, 200 likes per post. So, think of the engagement. More importantly, just keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball of your business. And really what's important to your business. I think just, instead of worrying about the followers, worry about your content, worry about the technical infrastructure of the SEO of your website, worry about your marketing automation, worry about the things that you can control, because you can't control the social media algorithms. You can try to dupe them. We all do our best. There's so many things we can't control. And so many businesses focus on those things instead of the things they can control and they can actually generate business from. Because I'll say it here, who is the biggest influence in social media? It's Google. Google is the biggest digital influencer out there. And people just do not, they go chasing after Instagram Reels. Go for it. TikTok, go for it, right? I look at my Google Analytics. I don't see much coming from that, right? For a good reason. But if I can optimize a few blog posts, I can get way more traffic than the number of followers my competitor has on Instagram. So I think really, we have to put this all into really, really solid perspective as to what's important for our business and go from there and not get lost in everybody talking about, number of followers and how do I increase followers? So yes, you should try to become more influential so that more people hear you and more people like, know, and trust you. But that should never be the end goal for any of this. It should always be to complement, as I like to say, social media, replaces nothing. It complements everything. I guess you could say the same thing about influence. It's just, it's a complementer to everything that you do, help you sell more books, get more gigs, speaking gigs or consulting gigs. And if you have that mindset, I think that you'll naturally be creating content, but maybe you'll tweak the way you create it, or maybe you'll embark on new content mediums or new platforms and you build influence as you go.
Fantastic. So do you want to take the third question for Neal?
Yeah. Neal, what would you say? How do we measure success as an influencer? Is there a way to do that?
Well, is this, you mean trying to become an influencer?
Well,
or
like say I think I'm an influencer. How do I measure success? Like, is it, I guess, deals? Is it that, people are approaching me? I mean, I guess, how do we measure success as an influencer? Because you brought up a great point about it's not really like the number of followers isn't really that measure of success.
So I think it's like, how do you know I got more website traffic? How do I know if I'm successful or not? I think it's the exact same thing. What you find is you get more people, ideally, if you do it right, you get more people following you, you get more website traffic, more downloads on your podcast, more viewers on your live stream. So there's a snowball effect of more and more people that are listening to you that comes. And probably anecdotally, you get more people reaching out to you. Mm-hmm. And anecdotally, when you talk to a potential customer, I got a CEO of one of the largest real estate companies read my book, right? Literally reached out to me after reading my book. So that's how I know that I have that influence, because and someone else, reached out to me because they heard my podcast. So that's how it's really, if you're not asking, especially when you get new business, how did you find out about me? Do you follow me on, are you a podcast subscriber? Have you read any? If you're not asking the questions, you'll never really know, because it's sort of like PR in many ways. Companies do PR. They never know how it has impact until it has impact. And I'd say the same thing with influence, but definitely more people reaching out to you, more people following you. And then when you get business asking those questions, those are the three ways just to confirm, how that influence is materializing into something. But I believe, just like a website, maybe influence is the PR of today, but it becomes just something part of what you do as a bit. If you're creating content and you're on social media, why wouldn't you want to try to yield more influence? And it's doing a lot of the same things, but it's just a different mindset. It's a mindset that says when someone reaches out and wants to interview you for their podcast, oh, what a waste of time. It's thinking, wow, I'm going to get to expose my content to their audience. Maybe they have 50 downloads per month, per episode. Maybe they have 500. But if my small business website is only getting 10 visits every time I have a new blog post, that's 5x, 10x, 20x the exposure I'm getting. So it's really that. It's like one of my startup clients, they start off with 0 Twitter followers. They're doing a webinar. They're reaching out to a company that has 700 Twitter followers that's agreed to be on their webinar, right? And they're going to promote it as well. When you only have 100 Twitter followers, 700, that's huge. That's 7x amplification, right? So it's just having that mindset, right? And everything I talk about here is a collaboration. It's a collaboration with someone. It's a collaboration with a content creator, with an entity on social media. And when you look at it that way, you just see things very, very different and you become more proactive. It's almost like companies, and I have a case study of this, and unfortunately, there were a number of case studies that didn't make my book. I actually just published a blog post Monday of like 16 influencer marketing case studies that didn't appear in the Age of Influence, literally the title. But I think of my friends at Simply Social Media in New Mexico, and they create events to, like the Santa Fe Opera, right? Created an event to bring influencers to them. So influencers will naturally be in there experiencing something and amplify the content. So and that's a great way of thinking about influence, right? Of creating events or creating reasons to reach out to people, whether it's a podcast interview or whether it's a live stream, or you want to do one of these, 2-day summits or 3-day summits. When you tap into other people that have influence, that's where a lot of the magic happens as well. And the more influence you have, the more those people will want to work with you. And therefore you get bigger and bigger amplification. So I think companies are doing a lot of this, but it's just a different mindset around that collaboration and around realizing, when you're working with another content creator, that inherently they have some influence that you probably want to tap into, and really doing that. So, yeah, hopefully that all makes sense. I know I've been talking a lot this morning.
And actually, it's funny. Amy and Caitlin's website was pictured on the show last week. George Demanis had taken their photo, so it's funny. It's a small world. They've gotten a shout out 2 weeks in a row on the on Social Chatter.
Amy and Caitlin, go girls!
We'll have to have them on, Jim, sometime, I think.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take Neal's comments. We're going to put those in the blog post recap that we're going to be publishing this weekend. Now what I do is I want to switch over to tool time. And what we're going to do, Jen, is we normally share 2 tools, but what I want to do is I want to just share 1 tool today. We'll put the other one in the blog post. And this tool is called Group High. So let me know when you have that pulled up, Jim, and I'll bring it up. And
there you
Group
go.
High, by the way, is speaking of influencers, it's a tool to help you find bloggers and social media influencers and actually measure the influencer marketing campaigns that you run so you can see how successful they are. So let me go and bring this up. Have you actually used this one, Neal? Or do you have any others you recommend, by the way?
I have used this one, and I know, well, yeah, I've used it. I know the founder. So this tool has a pretty rich history in the space.
So you want to, did I get it all right? I mean, do you have any?
Yeah. So this is, so Group High was one of the leading blogger outreach tools. Okay. So this is when we talk about mommy bloggers. There's someone named Kristen Matthews, going to give her a shout out. She's a consultant, influencer marketing consultant in Colorado, where Group High is. And she was their marketing manager. She actually used to blog for my site when it was called Maximize Social Business. And that's how I originally knew them. But they, because they help people find, or back in the day, find mommy bloggers, they're really good at indexing the web and finding content creators in the web. So what's happened, as you can imagine, is that the blogger outreach money went to influencer marketing, which has gone to Instagram, and they had to invest money to, to have like an Instagram search engine to append their blog search engine. So they've done that. And a lot of these influencer marketing tools that are out there really just focus on the Instagram side. But because GroupHigh has that background in the blog side, it makes it a really, really powerful addition and a really, really easy way to find, influencers. And, it's funny because I tend to use BuzzSumo when I do a lot of like content research, but in a similar way, you can do research on influencers, and it's probably more effective to do a research if you use the influencer tab on BuzzSumo. It's probably more effective to use a tool like GroupHigh to try to find those influencers.
Fantastic. So from a pricing standpoint, I know this one's actually, I think this one's a little pricey. Am I right? I think it's like $8,000 a month per user. Is that right?
It used to be an enterprise business model, and I thought that they had lowered that. Now maybe they've raised it back up again, but I thought they were trying to make this more for something that small businesses could afford. In fact, while we're on here, I'm going to try to find that. But GroupHigh was actually acquired as well. I think it's Maverick, a bigger influencer marketing company. Maverick. But and I talked to the founder, a few months after they were acquired. They are still operating as a separate company. So yeah, you know what? It looks like they might have gone back to the enterprise business model.
It's not as bad. 8,000 a year versus 8,000 a month. So
yeah, because the influencer marketing tools, those companies, they're working with big consumer brands. They're getting a lot of money, so they can charge that. A lot of agencies use them, so they divvy up that investment amongst their customers. But yeah, compared to a BuzzSumo, it's going to require a significant investment.
Definitely. So definitely check out GroupHigh if you're more on the enterprise side, and then check out BuzzSumo as well. If you're a small business and you want to tap into one of these influencer marketing tools. So what we're going to do now, actually, so I'm going to put all these other tools in the blog post recap that will be going out this weekend. But Neal, so I want to thank you for joining us this week for episode 257 of Social Chatter, where we discussed Instagram guides, Twitter quote tweets, Facebook's new terms of service changes, as well as merging Facebook Messenger and Instagram Direct. But what's the best place for people to get in touch with you if they want to chat with you, hire you, check out your book and whatnot?
Well, I am Neal Schaffer everywhere on social media. My website is nealschaffer.com. I am the real Neal, so don't make the Starbucks barista fail by spelling it Kniel or some weird variation. It's Neal, very simple. And there's a few Schaffers out there in social media. So my last name is spelled Schaffer. I also have a podcast for those podcast listeners. It's called the Maximize Your Social Influence podcast. And the book is called The Age of Influence, and it's available anywhere books are sold.
That's right.
Thank you, Jim.
So don't forget, guys, we have the blog post recap, socialchefs.com/SC257. That'll go out this weekend. We also have the Alexa Flash briefing, as well as the podcast as well for the show. And next Thursday, we're going to be joined by Juliet Stapleton. That's September 10th. Can't believe it. We're almost into almost October. My gosh, September 10th, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Juliet
Still
Stapleton.
feel like it's March.
Well, I love this time of the year because I can sing "Wake Me Up" when before September ends. Yeah. So the song is just stuck in my head all month. But anyway,
so we will see you all next week. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to Jem at Fusion Marketing, myself at Social Chefs, Neal at Neal Schaffer. And also be sure you pick up his book, The Age of Influence. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and we will see you all next week. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Sayonara.